Hi there. Welcome back, everybody, to the afternoon session of our online summer gathering brought to you by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. So just let me know that you're there. So just type in your names and before I introduce our next speaker. So I know we have a few viewers. It would be just lovely to let us know where you are. Hi, Andre from the Netherlands. Welcome. That's lovely. And Luna Fireoak. That's a lovely name. And Gabrielle from Germany. Lovely. Simon. Great. And from New York. Hi, Sherry. And Denise from Philadelphia. And sorry, that's my phone. Something is talking. It's Siri who thinks...
It's forgotten.
I never talked to her, and here she is. Norway. Hi, Greta. Lovely to see you. Okay, so you're all so welcome back. I hope you enjoyed this morning's session, the two speakers with Ronald and Hutton and John Matthews. Now, for this afternoon, we have another wonderful treat for you. It's Penny Billington. Penny, I just want to welcome you. It's so lovely to have you here.
Great to be here. What a fabulous morning. Really enjoying myself, as is everyone else.
So before Penny starts, I just want to say a few words about Penny. She is a most active Druid author and a speaker and a teacher, and she's been the editor of OBOD, the OBOD's magazine Touchstone for 20 years now. And she's currently teaching her Inner Journey workshops and co-facilitates the Ashgrove in the Glastonbury landscape. And her other sphere of interest is the magical work of Dion Fortune, and whose principles she's used in refining her approach to crafting the Druid path. And she's just published a short online course, The Druid's Eye View. And her published works, I'm sure many of you are familiar with these, and if not, I suggest you do. The Path of Druidry, and that's a Druid study guidebook and a course. There's the Wisdom of Birch, Oak and Yew. There's the Keys to the Temple, Unlocking Dion Fortune's mystical Kabbalah through her occult knowledge and olives. Oh my goodness. This is midday. Novels with Ian Rees. And then How to Stop the Rain, Conversational Magic with the Cosmos. Her latest book, I love this, 9 Ways to Charm a Dryad, will be published next spring. So you can find out about her and her activities. I'm going to put up her banner there so that you can see her website there. And the title of her talk today is Sacred Landscapes. So Penny, I'm going to say over to you.
Thank you, Emma. Let's get started. So we've got a lovely slideshow because we've all had lunch. So let's look at a few beautiful pictures. Emma is going to coordinate the slideshow for me, as I'm incapable of concentrating on more than one thing at a time. So we have the first slide. I'm really glad to have heard this two fabulous talks. First of all, from Ronald Hutton on sacred waters, secondly John Matthews on fairy, because we come down to bedrock now with sacred landscape, and of course there are elements of fairy and a lot of sacred water on in sacred landscape. I just want to alter my screen if you'll bear with me. Most of these pictures are mine or have been sent to me for Touchstone at some time or other, or are where I've got them from is lost in the mists of time. This is from an ancient book. So please take them in the spirit in which they're meant, which is not to take advantage of anyone else's work, but just to share the beauty of the images that I've been sent. Now, I've talked about the bedrock, the solidity, the concreteness of solid earth, but you see the picture is nothing to do with the earth. The picture is a skyscape. It's showing the patterns of the constellations and the stars. And this, why I've done this, will become relevant very soon. I want to do three things. I want to look at elements of landscape that the Celts particularly found sacred, and we know that from evidence in Celtic lands. I want to take you on a little tour of Glastonbury, because Glastonbury is a tiny market town, but it's really important because it has most of these sacred elements in a very small space. And of course, by taking you there, I'll be welcoming people for whom the pictures will hold very happy memories, and I'll be introducing it to people who've never been able to come to a gathering because of mobility issues, ill health, financial considerations, distance, and so on. I'd like to welcome you all to Glastonbury today, this place where we habitually meet. And as we walk around the environs of the Glastonbury landscape, not the town itself, I'm hoping that they will spark in you memories of your own sacred landscape, because Glastonbury is really special and really important and really magical, but so are your landscapes too. In fact, the landscapes we as Druids use every day worldwide are more sacred and more magical because we have a more intimate relationship with them. Whatever culture came before us, wherever we are spread out across the world, the cultures before us listened to the earth and responded to them, and we in our turn do exactly the same. And the earth, if we listen, would teach us the right way to relate to it. Now, Druids associate with the Celts, obviously, because that was the full flowering of Druid culture in the Iron Age. And the Celts I like to think of as a rolling, rollicking roadshow who just spilled out joyously across Europe, taking their culture, their artistry, their jewelry, their flamboyance, their beliefs, and spreading them across the country. And we, as a Druid culture, spread across the world today. And we make relationships with the land wherever we are. So let's look at some of the elements of sacred landscape on slide 2. Here we go. What we notice is that landscape that is internationally recognized as sacred usually has an impressive or unusual topography. There is something alien about it, or something extra special, extra beautiful, something that just shouts to us, "Look at me, you fool." I call these internationally sacred landscapes the supermodels of the natural world. You know, they have eyebrows and teeth and smiles. They impress themselves on our attention. And because of that, we imbue them with a sense of personality. Because we notice them, they make it easier for us to see the spiritual through the natural world. Now, every element of the natural world has the spiritual in it, but sometimes it's hard to see it. We've got to remember that that wonderful spiritual community of Findhorn was actually created on a rubbish dump with a handful of dilapidated caravans, and look at it today. It is a very, very intuitive and gifted person who can see the spiritual in that sort of degraded landscape, a landscape that hasn't been looked after. But for most of us, we need help. We need to see elements of impressive waterfalls, rocks, stones. Think of one now in your own country. It doesn't matter whether we think of the Victoria Falls or the Niagara Falls or the waterfalls in Wales. There'll be something about the thing we think of that just makes us stop and take time out from the world of the everyday. So what do we do when we see these landscapes? Usually we raise stones and marker stones to have our effect, to bring our influence also into the landscape. And often we make trackways there by our pilgrimage. They often have elements of sacred or ancient trees, and they often have elements of water, sacred water, because water is the most mysterious element. We are all incubated in the internal sea of the womb, the salt water of the womb. We are born of water, and Celtic culture believes we go back to water across to the west. So there's often water in sacred place, and they all have a sense of the liminal. As I said, they inspire us to breathe deeper, to take time out, to respond to the world in a slightly different way. They are often, islands are often important in sacred landscape, caves and mountains, places of incubation and places of epiphany. We'll go into all these through the slides. We can find them all in Glastonbury. The last thing is that they often have mythological associations, because what we're interested in is not only what the landscape does, but what sort of response it provokes from us. And the narrative strain of the land seems to provoke us to imbue it with myth and legend. And so it is in Glastonbury. There are many, many myths and legends, but also they are constantly regenerating, because the landscape keeps working on people. So I'm separating the stories into two. There's myth or legend, and by that I mean medieval or pre-medieval, and Glastonbury story, by which I mean probably within the last 150 years, probably within we'll say the 20th century or the late Edwardian, Victorian Edwardian age. So I'll tell you Glastonbury stories and legends. That's the distinction between the two. Let's go on, shall we? Because you're visiting Glastonbury. And I've met you in Bristol at the airport or the train station, and we've got on the 376 bus, which a lot of you who've visited Glastonbury will remember, and we're trundling through the levels, lowlands, waterlogged in the winter. And we look and we see the Tor in the distance, and immediately we can see what we mean by liminal space, something that looks strange and otherworldly, something that looks as if it doesn't quite belong, something that makes us wonder what the story is, why is it there? The simple geological story, as well as the myths and legends. It is drawing us like a magnet. It's drawing us back into history as we imagine what it would have been like for our ancestors to just be walking these marshy landscapes on the trackways with this in front of them. So while we're on the bus, we not only look at the landscape, but we imagine on the low-lying levels a mist coming down and the hill appearing to float in a sea, like the primal sea and the primal mound from the sea. No wonder it has captured people's imaginations since the beginning of time, we'll say. So, being Druids, we chat on the bus, and we chat about the theory of why some land is special. Let's go on to the next slide. And we think about the three worlds. The world in the middle is the world of our bread, the world of the five senses. We have our being, we live in this, and we have our contracts, our responsibilities. We have to make money and make the mortgage and look after the children, all those sorts of things. But still we pursue a spiritual life as well. Gwynfyd is the more rarefied atmosphere, where we can take the realm where we can take the broad overview, get a perspective of the whole of our life. We can see instead of not being able to see the woods for the trees, we can just look above and see the whole picture. And this is the place of the bards. Taliesin said, "My natural home is the realm of the summer stars." So imagine Arwen pouring down from this. But what we're interested in, when we think about sacred landscape, is Annwn, the inner world, the dark, bright place, the place where which is parallel to our world, which is peopled by long-lived and gracious magical people, where the orchards have flower and fruit and bud and leaf all on them at the same time, and where there are cracks between the worlds, liminal spaces, where a hero may move from one to the other for the good of all, or a beautiful woman may come from Annwn and claim a husband, as in the first branch of the Mabinogion. Annwn can also be regarded as a great cauldron of regeneration, constantly regenerating and revivifying things. And if you relate this to magical landscape, to sacred landscape, it always looks otherworldly, as if it's constantly being renewed. Think of your favourite small sacred place, perhaps in your garden, and think of the energy of the earth bubbling up from it every night, and compare it to a great big public park, which has always got fluorescent lights on it and drunks and people partying, and it never gets time to relax and regenerate. Now, just as there are places where the earth's crust is thin and so volcanoes push up, I like to think that there are places where the psychic crust is thin and the regenerating power of Annwn bubbles through and makes these places that we regard as sacred sites, and that the Celts did as well. Glastonbury is one of them, and the tour was called a volcano of spiritual force. So let's go on to the next slide and see yes. You've been onto the internet and the Unity and Diversity site, and here you show me the map of Glastonbury that you've printed out. And we see here how Glastonbury used to be an island, and all the blue, the low-lying ground, would have been underwater. Now this has always been a big thing in Somerset, low-lying land, and the constant reclaiming it. So the farmers always farm in the summer, let it get water, graze it in the summer, it gets waterlogged in the winter. But the Romans were the last people to really seriously try and take back land from the sea. They took huge swathes of it from the coast. And then in 1600, early 1600s, a tsunami came and destroyed all that they'd recreated, killed 2,000 people, and the waters of the sea lapped practically to the sides of the Tor. So it hasn't happened for quite a time, but in the winter still, if we caught this bus in the winter, we would go past drowned fields. While you've got the map out, I'm going to show you, we come along the brown road on the bottom left, it's the A39, and we come to the Goose or the Swan's Beak. But before we get there, we cross the River Brue. And just before we cross, that is where we will get off the bus and start our pilgrimage. And then we'll walk along, and at the Swan's Beak, we will turn left onto a sacred site, and then we'll cross straight over and go up that high hill and along the Goose's Neck and walk across into Glastonbury and to Glastonbury Tor, which you can see as the highest contour lines, which are dark, dark brown. And to some people, make a goddess shape, rather like the shape of Wales, being the shape of an old woman with her finger pointing to Bardsey Island. So while we've been thinking about the water all surrounding Glastonbury, if I've got the next slide right, we will be looking out the window with the eyes of vision and seeing in the past, this is how the road we're travelling on would have looked underwater. This is the land that the Iron Age Celts and predecessors had their lake villages on. Lake villages with huts on stilts, and a very rich land with plenty of fish and fowl, plenty of things to eat, and with the sea washing right up, so very good for trading, very good trade route. They could buy in anything that they didn't need, anything that they couldn't produce. But here, as we see the sun set across the waters, we wonder if this could ever happen again. And then we realise that this was taken in 2010 when there was a flood in Glastonbury, in the Glastonbury area, that flooded the road, made it impassable from Glastonbury to Taunton, 20 miles, and lasted for 6 months. And if you drove along the road as it was drying out afterwards, the smell, it was like being in a great big fetid, stagnant pond for weeks afterwards. Let's get to the next slide. If we can have the next slide, please, Emma. Thank you. Celtic Islands, we'll just look at the Celtic, remind ourselves that Glastonbury is not alone in being a sacred island. We've got Bardi, Egg, Iona, Lindisfarne, also regarded as islands of the dead. The Celts would take the bodies of saints out to these islands. Bardi is known as the Isle of 20,000 Saints, and also the burial place, one of the burial places of Arthur. Of course, in Glastonbury, we believe that's not true. And also the place of Merlin's imprisonment. So very sacred land there. But in a moment, we're going to get off the bus and go to a monastic settlement that predates the settlement on Iona. So on the next slide, we're going to get off the bus here just by the bridge, and we see the bridge over the River Brue is called Pompal's Bridge. And immediately we're into Arthurian myth. Pompal's Bridge, the Pons Perilous, the perilous bridge, the bridge of challenge, the bridge that will take us over into a holy, a magical, a sacred land. Are we worthy? This was the point that the thing that the knights of King Arthur's court had to ask themselves. So what we're going to do, if you would like to, because as we look at that river, we remember it's been recut and messed around by the monks, and in modern times quite a bit. But what it used to be was a lake of wonder. And legend has it that that is the lake that Bedivere threw the sword Excalibur into to be reclaimed by the Lady of the Lake. These places, these crossing places, these portal places are places of challenge, places where you have to think what you're doing and decide it's right for you. So carefully, if we wish, we will take out a silver coin, and in memory of the votive offerings that Ronald talked so eloquently about, in memory of that folk memory that makes people toss a coin even into the most neglected little fountain in a town centre, we will throw our silver coin into the water and ask for a blessing on our journey. We cross the road, across the bridge then, and we're about to come to the old settlement, but you won't understand the shape of it unless I show you my map. So let's have that on the screen now. Here we are, land features and relics. Look, you can see the main road. We've just crossed over the bridge, and we're going to turn left, and we can see that there's a low mound which is called Bride's Salmon. This is an ancient monastic settlement. The last excavation was in 2016, but because it's associated with St. Bridget, tradition sort of likes to believe that there was a settlement of women here. And of course, in Arthurian legend, there's also the thought that knights would go to the castle of women, to settlements of women, and that women would look after them on their quests in those days of strict gender bias and roles. So it's rather lovely to see this salmon, and Bride's Mound is the eye, just behind the eye of the salmon there. And to the left of the salmon's face, there's an indication of where a wonder, a modern Glastonbury story, a wonder was found. And this is also by Dr. Goodchild, who drew Bride Salmon. And he found, he placed a glass bowl that he believed might have been the Holy Grail in the sluice. And it was found by psychic means by 3 maidens, and was a bit of a cause célèbre in the early 1900s, when famous and august churchmen debated whether it really was the Holy Grail. So already we're into myth, legend, and story. We're into Arthurian myth. We're into the fusion of pagan and Christian, because although some people associate this with Saint Bridget, another associate it with the goddess Bride or Breed. So no one can claim Glastonbury. No one. It is open and allowing of all beliefs. So let's just look at the actual pictures of it. Where are we going to walk? If we can have the next slide, please. Beckery. Bridesmount. The area of Bridesmount is called Beckery, which Emil will be able to tell you means Little Ireland. So St. Bridget came from Ireland. Tradition has it that she was at Glastonbury Abbey, and this place is called Little Ireland after her. You can see that we're walking on the path, and you can see where the 2 druids are, those flashes of white and black. They're about to go through the gate that leads up to that long, low mound, which is Bride's Mound. The picture on the right at the top is us standing on the top of the mound. And in the extreme right, through the trees, we can see Glastonbury Tor, but not very well because it's midsummer. So let's go down to the bottom photo to see the Tor clearly. In a moment, having just paused for a moment on the mound and breathed a blessing on all the priestesses or nuns or monks or whoever's remains lie beneath those places, we're going to continue our journey, walking down the mound, walking across from left to right across this long field, which would have been very marshy in the past, if not underwater. And we're going to go up this next long, low hill, much higher than the one we've been on. And when we get there, we're going to be pretty puffed out. I think we're going to get to the top and we're going to say, God, I'm a bit weary now, which is why, of course, everyone who's been to Glastonbury knows that this is called Weary All Hill. We're back into Christian legend when Joseph of Arimathea bought the cruets containing the blood and sweat of Jesus after the crucifixion, and he came to found a church in Glastonbury, and he put his hawthorn staff on Weary All Hill and said he was weary, and miraculously the staff rooted, the staff bloomed, it flowered, and even today Glastonbury thorns, there are various of them around the town, in the abbey and in the church and other places. They will flower in May, but they will also flower at Christmas. And there's a ceremony every year. The local vicar and the oldest child of a local junior school pick a piece of flowering hawthorn and send it to the Queen, and it's there on her breakfast table when she talks to the nation. So when the Arthurian knights were here in Bride's Mound, we think they might have vigiled in that alternative realm of legend that we're in, and they might have purified themselves. And if you see the chimney sticking out in front of the Tor, this is still a place of purification, because that's part of a treatment for dirty water plant. And when my husband and I came I think in the 90s we came exploring this and nearly ended up in the middle of a sewage works instead of on Bride's Mound, but thankfully we found it. So let us continue across the road and to walk up Weary-all Hill on the next slide. We're on the top of the hill now, and all is verdant and green. And we look across and we can see the Tor in front of us. But as we walk along, it will feel as if we're walking on the back of a giant fish. Because as well as Bride's Mound being Bride's salmon, this Weary-all Hill is also part of a landscape zodiac. It also is a fish. It's part of Pisces. More about that later. But as we walk along, if it was May, we would look down to the road and we would see alternating hawthorn trees of red and white and red and white and red and white, two very significant colours in Celtic story. So we'll talk about those later. But they are a delight when you come out of the supermarket to see this evidence of human and fairy connection in the red and white hawthorns. Up above, that's the legend of the Holy Thorn. The Holy Thorn was cut down in the Civil War and burnt as a superstitious relic. And legend has it that it blinded the soldier who cut it down. Chipperwood blinded him. It was replanted. There's no mention of it in the 1930s and 40s. There's a lot more mention of an influential walnut tree. But in the 50s, the Holy Thorn was replanted on this fish's back on Weary-all Hill to mark the what's it called when the Queen's crowned? Coronation, the Queen's coronation. And there was absolute horror and outrage and grief when it was vandalized and cut down and eventually killed in about 1910, I think. 2010, I think that was, which shows just how much our lives are bound up with the health of sacred trees. So, how many more trees have we got? We used to have loads of sacred trees in Glastonbury. On the right here are Gog and Magog on the far side of the Tor. We won't get to them today, but they are meant to be the giant oaks that are the remnants of an avenue that marched 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 right up to the Tor. And it's documented that the last one was cut down in 1912 by a farmer clearing his field. Now, modern story or legend or whatever has it that there was a corresponding avenue of yews that marched to meet them at the bottom of the Tor. And we don't know whether that's true or not, but we do know when you get to the bottom of the Tor, there are remnants of 4,000-year-old yews, roots and so on that have been dug up by archaeologists. So we walk along talking about sacred trees and saying hello to all our Druid members who can't be here, who are perhaps named after yews, people like Ivor and Eve and Yvonne and other trees such as hazel and cherry and rowan. Welcome to you all, and let's have a blessing on the trees that still keep Glastonbury verdant and beautiful and purify the atmosphere. As we move on, please. And we come down off of the hill onto an actual road. And this is the sign that I saw when I first came in the 1970s. And it absolutely, as we said in those days, blew my mind. I actually had a sort of reality shift because it says, "Welcome to Glastonbury, ancient Isle of Avalon." But I knew that Avalon couldn't be real because Avalon was the place of fairy. So was I entering Avalon? Was I actually going to go literally to the place where King Arthur went to be healed of his grievous wounds? I just didn't know what to make of it at all. And of course, the whole place has this liminal quality. Avalon means the Isle of Apples. And to the Celts, those are the paradisal isles. Those are the places, the summer lands, the lands of the ever young, the places where we will go when we die. So did I want to go to the place where people go when they die? Did I need healing? I thought, well, I want to go to a place of regeneration. I'll be respectful when I'm here. I'll see what I can see. And I read up about there are derivations of the word Glastonbury as well, but I like the fact that it has glass at the beginning. Welsh speakers can correct me if you will, but I believe glass can mean blue or green or bright or fresh. And certainly in Glastonbury, it's associated with glass, the glass island. Referring particularly to the Tor which can become invisible and otherworldly and shift from one world to the next. So this makes us think quite hard as we go past this sign and walk along the road. We're going to walk past Fisher's Hill. Fisher's Hill is can we go back slightly, please? We seem to be going the wrong way. Thanks. We'll just stay at the portal for a minute because we're walking along a main road at the moment, but it's Beer Road or Beer Lane. It's named after an abbot, but we're walking along by the houses that back onto the abbey, the ruined abbey, where, of course, in the late 1100s, the monks actually said they had disinterred the skeletons of Arthur and Guinevere. They found a massive skeleton of a man with a small skeleton of a woman with golden hair, which became dust as they opened the tomb, which was a hollowed out tree trunk. It was buried ever so far down. I don't know how they found it, but it regenerated their fortunes after a disastrous fire. And all the remains, of course, disappeared at the dissolution of the monasteries. So we walk past that, and in front of us, we see two hills. There is the dome of Chalice Hill, and there is the peak of the Tor. I don't know which slide we're coming to next, so let's get on to it and see what happens. Aha! Where there are hills, there are caves. No matter what the geology, our active imaginations will conjure up stories of hills and caves. Now, Chalice Hill is the dome, and domes are womb-like. And what is held in the womb? A treasure, and is often held by a dragon. So we'll find out about the treasure of Chalice Well in a minute. What is held under the Tor? A vast cave system. And this is the reality. This is not the cave because you can't get in the caves anymore. And of course, they have their spooky stories about them. Monks went into the cave system under the Tor and went mad. People went in singing and suddenly the voices stopped and they were never seen again. Lots and lots of cave mythology. But in caves and in hills, often we have legends of protector gods under hills. And here we come to an ancient god called Gwyn ap Neith. Now Gwyn, white, fair, otherworldly, ap Neith, son of mist. And as we look at the Tor, we're in the bright sunlight, but it feels as if there's a breath of mist around us, a breath of otherworldliness. And we remember that he's not only the ancient god of Glastonbury, but he is a psychopomp. He is the god who conducts the souls of the dead. He calls himself the escort to the grave. He's found on battlefields. But we remember with relief that gods under hills are also protector gods, as Bran is, as Kronos is, as Arthur is. So, and we remember that Gwyn was actually put there to protect us. He was put there by someone in legend to keep the bad things away from us. So we, as we look at the Tor, we will bow to Gwyn ap Neath and consider him with respect. And we'll go on to the next slide. Because as we walk along past the dome of Chalice Hill and we turn left on Wellhouse Lane, we come to the Red and White Springs. And these, of course, Ronald mentioned in his talk. I'm Tor obsessed. These I've pulled from the websites of the Red and White Spring websites with grateful thanks, because I really can't get any pictures to do them justice. But what a contrast. Now, this, I think, might be the biggest mystery of Glastonbury, the fact that waters that run and stain things red and waters that run and stain things white run within a few feet of each other. They're just separated by, 12, 15 feet. And this is a union of opposites because they're completely different in character. The first is the Red Spring, Chalice Well Spring. The gardens are open and reflective and are a development from high mystical Christianity. A lady called Alice Buckton, who bought them and named them in 1912. On the right-hand side, we've got the pagan influence from the Tor of the White Spring, the chalky spring that runs out from under the caverns of Gwyn ap Neath, the King of Faery. And this strange-looking structure is a reservoir that was built in the first quarter of the 1800s because of an outbreak of cholera. So they the Water Board destroyed a place of absolute beauty, of running rivulets of 1,000 little chalk-bearing streams, and put the water in the reservoir instead. Both of these have been literally life-giving to the people of Glastonbury, because they are unfailing sources of water with very, very strong flow, always. And in the 1920s, the Red Spring saved the people of Glastonbury from a drought. It was a source of pure water that never failed. And the White Spring, as I said, became the main drinking water to save them from cholera. Unfortunately, because the water was full of chalk, it furred up all the pipes of the town within a very short space of time. And the Water Board had to find alternative sources of water. But it makes me think that if you set a sword underneath one of these rivulets and it dripped on, very soon you would have a literal sword in a stone in Glastonbury. You can see the open nature of the red. You can see the closed and intimate nature of the white. The red is a peace garden, just dedicated to peace. The white is dedicated to Bridget, or bride, or breed, and to Gwyn, the King of Faery. And also, the red denotes humanity. We are red. We have blood in us. White always denotes fairy, otherness, divinity. So a real meeting of two opposites here. And the water is freely available because both of these enclosed spaces can have outlets, spouts, where every day you can see people filling up water bottles. So if you wish, you may go and drink from the Red Spring and taste the iron in the water, and drink from the White Spring outlet and taste the chalkiness of the water. And with the blessings of all the Christian and pagan legends in Glastonbury, we're about to walk up the Tor. If we can go on to the next slide, please. As we walk up, you asked me about sacred stones because people generally make their mark on the landscape. They do in open spaces. We think of wide open spaces with when we get inside the stone circles there, it becomes obvious that's the only place in the landscape that you could possibly build this stone circle. It just is a perfection of landscape. We don't have that in Glastonbury, but we do have these interesting shaped stones called tor burrs, which are like egg shapes. And given the dragon associations with the treasure of the tor and the treasure of Chalice Well, the treasures, of course, being the mystical red and white springs. And of course, I don't think I said, but I think Ronald did, the red is coloured by the blood from the chalice of the Last Supper. Because we've got these dragon treasures, it's rather nice for Druids to have dragon stones as we're about to walk up a hill that reminds us of dragons because it's dedicated to Saint Michael. And Saint Michael, of course, is famous for putting down the dragon. And we remake that legend, if we like, by saying Saint Michael, the great solar regent, is actually making a connection with his spear between the sun and the earth energy, which we see as a dragon. There is another egg stone in a secret place on the tor, and there are other stones on the tor that denote different shapes. There's also a place called this Stone Down Field as well, which is of significance. But now we're about to ascend the tor. If we have the next slide, please. And we begin to think that perhaps we're not alone as we ascend the tor. Perhaps some other people are. Excuse me, I've just lost my picture here. That's right. Yeah. We're beginning to think that perhaps there are some other Druids who might be ascending the tor with us and might be seeing what we see, because what we see is a very strange configuration. And this brings us back to what makes things sacred, or what makes things relevant, or how do fashions in spiritual relevance change? Because we can see clearly that this is a labyrinth, and it's used as a labyrinth, it's revered as a labyrinth. Blow me down, in the 1930s, it wasn't regarded as a labyrinth at all, because people saw this holy hill as a representation of the hill of Atlantis, with a great big spiral mound going round and round and round it. Now, is one right or is the other right? Both are right. What is right is that we're not making it up. We're looking to the land first, and the narrative strain of the land is evoking a response that makes it relevant to us, makes us able to relate to it. So the truth is always the same, that this is a most extraordinary place. The story we put on it, whether it's of Atlantis or of an ancient labyrinth, really doesn't matter, providing we go on pilgrimage with the right attitude, making time and space to honour a special place. So we're going to walk up, and just as a shortcut, we're going to pretend that we're walking straight up. There is a nicely cut path through this labyrinth. As we pass the layers of the labyrinth, we see odd stones marking them. But we're going to walk up this long side of the tor, and we take the next, we'll go to the next slide. And we're going to imagine what we can see when we get to the top. Two things happen when we walk up. First of all, when we walk up any hill, we make an effort. We put in time and effort. And the second thing is the atmosphere, the air actually changes. It becomes more rarefied and purer. And this is why mountains are seen as places of epiphany, liminal places where we can see the broad overview. We can get nearer to Gwynedd. This is what has been seen from a very high place. A mythopoetic landscape, a landscape we can make story in. This was seen by a sculptor in the 1930s. Her name was Catherine Maltwood. She looked at maps. She looked at aerial maps from the First World War, from the very earliest planes. And below me, she saw a great big lion, which you can probably see right at the bottom of the circle. When I first came to Glastonbury, I knew that there was a zodiac, a land zodiac, and I really thought when I stood on the top of the tor, I'd be in the middle of it. That seemed to make sense to me. It would be spread out all around me. No, if you go up from the lion up to the top, you can see that bird shape, that shape of the swan or the goose. Here it's called the phoenix, and that is where the tor is. That's where we're looking from. So we stand on top of the tor, and we know we've got a landscape all around us. It reminds us of the regeneration of Anun and of all the sensitizing of the land that might respond to cosmic forces to make shapes. Is it true? Is it not true? What matters is since the 1930s, people have acted as if this is special and have made pilgrimage to it. And that makes its own special atmosphere. As we stand on top of the tor, we know that we're in a string of Michael churches, although we only have the tower here, connecting to others right the way across the country. The Michael and Mary line runs underneath. On with the next slide, please, because we must join up with our fellow members. Here they are. They're coming from trackways. They're coming along ley lines. They're coming from all the quarters of Druidry to meet us here in this place at the bottom of the map of England where all these ley lines join. So let's go on to the next slide and perhaps we'll see some of them. Yes, I had to put in, start from the top left, I had to put in this from 2007. Anyone who went up the tour in 2007 deserves a I Survived 2007 t-shirt. The rain fell in buckets. It was a monsoon. And when I tell you, there's a lovely path you can see on the bottom left up to the tour, and we couldn't see the path. It was a waterfall pouring down. People waded through a waterfall to get up to the tour. Top right, we see this is the west. The tower is on the west of the top of the tour. Here are our westerly people all getting ready for our OBOD celebration. And the bottom right, bottom left, you can see us coming down after our celebration. And on the right of the picture, you can see that long line of Pisces, the Pisces fish that is Weary Hill. And over on the horizon, we have the westerly sea. And then on the extreme right bottom, we go down and we leave the hill to the evening light to regenerate. We leave it to the King of Fairy, to the otherworldly beings, having given thanks and made celebration together. Next slide, please. Hello. Can we have the next slide, Emma? Can we get back to it? The point I want to make, this is the last slide. Not one of these pictures shows anywhere more magical than where you live. Not one is more magical than the pictures that you place on Facebook or on your Grove pages or whatever, because those are the places that you make special. Those are the places of your stories, of your communication, of your living Druid practice. So thank you very much for spreading out across the world. We often think of what's a collective name for Druids, and people can only think of silly ones. But I think a really good one would be a diaspora of Druids. We are spread out across the world, all making relationship, connection, and story with the land wherever we are, and learning from it, and being kept sane and sensible and grounded, and through it and our love of nature and intense curiosity, getting a glimpse into the world of spirit. So thank you to everyone who does that. As you can see, when 200 of us join on the tour, the light of Arwen can shine down on us. And this fabulous picture comes from a much missed member called Nigel Daly, who used to send in a lot of pictures from the gatherings for us. And he caught something very special there. So thank you to him. Now, all is about to fade into the mist of memory. We're going to return to our own places. So wherever you go this year, I wish you joy of your pilgrimages. thank you for joining me, and may the blessings of the land always inform our Druidry. Thank you very much for your attention.
Penny, absolute wonderful talk. Roma's comment from Roma Johnson. Thank you, Penny. I've made pilgrimage to Glastonbury a dozen times. You bless me.
Thank you.
So it's, I mean, I don't know how many times I've been, and it's like, oh, I want you now to take me on a trip, because you've actually animated it so much more clearly for me. And I didn't know about Beckery, that it was, I think, Beag era, Little Ireland. I didn't know that. I think that's lovely.
The thing is, when we all get together, we're so overexcited. It's such a rare opportunity to be together in community that obviously takes priority. But usually people are flying in, and they give commitment of money and time and effort, but they can't spend an extra week exploring the landscape as well, which is a great pity.
Exactly.
But they can explore their own landscape, and that's what we all do. So
we have only a few more minutes, just a very short time for questions. One is from Lizzie. Do you have a book or online info to help us find sacred landscapes in our own areas?
Well, I would say look for the things. I would say go out a lot locally. Don't go hundreds of miles. Go out a lot locally, and go out with a fascinated mind to say, what's the land saying to me? Look, and when you go out asking what the land has got to say to you, often you get an answer. Oh, it's telling me it's a bit spooky around here. Okay, let's get back up into the sunshine, and you start to make your own. I know the most wonderful, practical and prosaic woodsman, who walks his land every morning and every night. But when he walks past a certain place, he says, oh, I don't go past there later at night. I do that early evening, and then that's it for the night. Something about the landscape tells him, not that things are inimical, but they want to be left alone at that point. And I mean, I know some groves have had experiences of having wonderful celebrations in the wild, and then they all get the feeling, that's enough.
Time to go.
Time for us to leave. Time for us to leave. So, but we have to, often when we go out with friends and that, when my grove goes out for a walk, we tend to try and have a silent, part of the walk silent, so we can just tune into the land. We spend 5 minutes chatting and, eating biscuits and things like that. And then at a signal, usually a portal place, we pass maybe 2 elder trees and say, that's it, let's just calm down now. Because without us making the time, the land will never speak to us.
Absolutely.
So find what's there in your own land, your own country.
This one from Aline. It makes me wonder how much a person living in a big city is missing. How to fix that? Can we experience all these wonders?
Yes. I think I lived in Derby, which is a city in the Midlands, very industrial, very built up. I was in the inner city, and you crave this connection, so you go out to make it. So, for example, every new moon, I knew the walk I would do around all the streets and houses and where I would see the new moon, where I would see the full moon. As I walked through the city centre, I knew where there was a luckham oak, which is very rare, and hidden away, but I knew where it was. And as we walked towards the library, from streets and streets away, there would be the smell in July of the lime tree outside the library, perfume, the whole thing. So the fact that you have to look for it makes it extra special to you. And also there are always parks and things like that to go to. And there are always, I went to a job I didn't particularly like, and as I walked along, I realised I was ignoring the trees, tree-lined street. And then I realised that I thought, oh, blimey, there's my uncle. Just that funny look of my uncle. Oh, there. Oh, hello, mum. And this one. And I built a relationship up with the trees. I did this for years. I was very, very pleased with myself. Then I realised I completely ignored the hedge on the other side. You know, we are always blind to so much. It's a question of trying to keep our fascination so we keep tuned in. Because, you know, a weed in a crack of a pavement can tell you more than being blasé because you live in a place of beauty. It's all in the attitude.
And of course, oh, I'm going to. Okay, there's an echo. Can you mute yourself for me? And then
Yep.
Okay, that's better. So as Druids, you know, we connect with landscape, and it's about not just relying on the so-called well-known sacred spaces, but to find the sacredness and the magic in our own landscape. And the Irish word for druidry and magic is the same. It's driocht. So that no matter where you are, and I just love that, you know, finding weeds and cracks, or knowing where the moon rises, or whatever it is, that's about exploring. And that's really what Druidry is about, is finding your own. And of course, with our teachings, it's not just about what we learn from books, but it's what we learn from nature ourselves and create our own teaching. And I think that's so important. There's just one question, you can unmute yourself now. What about the Michael and Mary lines? Can you tell us some more about that?
Well, this is I suppose I'd call it story rather than legend, because it was who is it? John, I've forgotten his name. The famous View Over Atlantis man, John Michel. John Michel had this realization that there were a lot of hills dedicated to St. Michael, churches on hills dedicated to St. Michael in a straight line going across what happened to be the longest stretch of land in the bottom section of the country. Whether it's true, it's true now. And we actually did some meditations with people all the way along the line, again, for local space where they lived. So people in Norfolk did it in Norfolk, people in Cornwall did it in Cornwall. We did it in Borough Mump because the tour is so overpopulated. Yeah. That's the trouble with sacred space. Everyone wants a bit of it. Once a month for 6 months, we did a meditation on the line. It's meant to be an energy line that runs not only through the country, but runs right the way around the world, which, and there are plenty of books on that. After maybe, I don't know, but I'll say 20 years after that, was people realized that there was this, although the line is straight that connects the churches, it's not a straight line. It's an energy line through the land. And a lot of energy lines follow underground streams. But people realized there was a softer energy, as well as this very robust energy, and that corresponded to it. And they called it the Mary line.
Yes.
And often these two lines crossed and crisscrossed under sacred spaces. So there are apart from that, there are books on it, but it's just one of the things that makes Glastonbury a sacred place. If you look at the Michael line in England and you superimpose a giant on it, the Glastonbury is at the heart centre. The heart centre. And long before this was postulated, the mystics of the Avalonians said Glastonbury is the heart centre of England, and London, obviously with business and commerce, London is the head centre, Glastonbury is the heart centre. So that, yeah.
Just Holly has lost your book. Where can she get other copies? From your website or from the OBOD shop?
Yeah, yes, I mean my books are all freely available. I think the OBOD shop's got them, or I have. If you go, I tell you what, why doesn't everyone go to my website? Because I was so proud of it, because it was such a dreadfully difficult thing to do. And it gives you all my news, and it looks like a proper website. But yes, certainly all the information, it will be there.
And it's there on the screen. Penny, we've gone over time and we're getting ready now for our ritual. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful joy. A trip of magic to places that I'm familiar with and some I wasn't. So you're taking me the next time we ever get there. Hopefully next year. So thank you so much, Penny. So I'm just going to thank you all.
I should slip into my robe. I'm off to slip into my robe.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your questions and being here. So I'm going to end this broadcast, and then we'll meet again at 3:30 for our Alban Hevin ritual. So until then, slán go fóill.